one of the things that's been really fun about some of the research that we've done at Iowa State in the last several years is some of the collaborations that we've formed. We're a group of mineral and vitamin nerds, but we've also found some really great immunology nerds to hang around with. And I say that because we all, we sit and have a beer and talk about our results.
Welcome to the Rumination Podcast, presented by Jeffo Nutrition. Hi, I'm your host, Chris Gwyn, and today's discussion will focus on research that Dr. Stephanie Hansen, the Iowa State University, has done on the use of protected B vitamins in beef-receiving cattle. Dr. Hansen is the Tyrone D. Arts, MD, Chair for Faculty Excellence in Animal Science at Iowa State University. An Iowa native, she earned her BS from Iowa State and her master's and PhD from North Carolina State University. With over 110 peer-reviewed publications and over $11 million in funding as the co-principal investigator or principal investigator, she has established an original and impactful beef cattle research program. A major focus of her program is the refinement of mineral requirements for feedlot cattle. She has received early and mid-career awards in research from Iowa State and from ASAS, the American Society of Animal Scientists. Dr. Hansen is passionate about training the next generation of animal scientists and recently published the Graduate Mentors Trail Map, a guide for faculty who work with graduate students. She enjoys hiking, photography, and writes crime thrillers set in national parks. Dr. Hansen, welcome to Rumination Podcast.
Hi, Chris. It's great to be here.
So, Dr. Hansen, really want to just jump in. You were involved in some research last fall, this winter, on the use of rumen-protected B vitamins in receiving cattle. And wondering if you could share with the audience on why B vitamins would be important to receiving cattle in particular.
Absolutely. So if we kind of go back and look at the NRC guidelines, we've really ignored kind of two classes of vitamins, and that is vitamin C and the B vitamins. And the animal is able to make, cattle are able to make vitamin C from glucose in their liver. So we have to drink our OJ in the morning to get vitamin C because we can't make it the way our cool cattle can. So really not a lot of work is focused on that, right? Because the assumption has been the animal can make it, it's fine. Similarly, they get most of their B vitamins from rumen microbial synthesis. And so again, largely have really ignored a lot of the requirements there or potential requirements because the thought has been, well, his bugs make it for him, so he's fine. However, if we think about like how those microbes are going to get the substrate to be able to make those B vitamins, of course, they're making it for themselves, right? They're not altruistic. They're making it for themselves. They're going to use it when they die off and wash downstream and end up in the intestine. Then it becomes a source of B vitamins for the cow at that point. But if we think about some of the things that especially happen during periods of stress, like weaning or receiving to the feedlot or when an animal is sick, all critical times for B vitamins, I should add, we don't have as much feed going into that animal, right? They are not consuming as much because of stress or because of disease. And the microbes need that feed stuff, that corn or hay or whatever is coming into the rumen to be able to make those B vitamins. So we're really interested in this window in particular because it's kind of the perfect storm of all the stressors that maybe increase the demand for B vitamins, but also the decrease in substrate for the microbes to make the B vitamins, which should decrease the amount of B vitamins that are actually going to the animal themselves. So we feel like this is a window where we just might have some of those shortcomings that we need to overcome with dietary supplementation.
And so it makes complete sense, right? Filling a void where deficiencies are quite likely. But why B vitamins? What do they do to a feedlot receiving cattle that would be important in their overall performance, health, productivity, profitability in the end?
So the way that I teach this to my nutrition students is that if you think about the macros like protein and carbohydrates and lipids, often the things that we formulate rations for initially, those are like the bricks in a wall. Like if you stack those bricks on top of each other, they're pretty robust and they're a big chunk of that wall, right? But you could push those bricks over with a finger, right? Because there's nothing holding them together. So if you think about minerals and vitamins in water as collectively making the mortar that you could put between those bricks to hold it together and you let it dry, now it'd be pretty hard to push that wall over, right? It's a sturdy structure. And I love that analogy. I stole that from somebody, one of my friends in industry. And I love that analogy because really what it says is you can get all the big things in the diet right, the macros, proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, but we need things like B vitamins to actually have the animal extract energy from those. So they're really important in things like carbohydrate metabolism, glucose metabolism, basically how the animal takes that feed and turns it into ATP, which is the cellular energy source that is our whole purpose. If we could just feed ATP, we could skip a lot of the steps along the way, but we feed feedstuffs to eventually get energy for the animal to support growth and immune function. So energy production. And then the other major one is protein. So everything with making new amino acids, building new proteins like muscle, cytokines for the part of the immune system to support growth. B vitamins are super essential for a variety of those pathways.
No, that's a great reminder of their extensive need in the metabolism and the nutrition of animals. So thanks for sharing that. And then last year you started a trial using protected B vitamins in receiving cattle. Can you tell us in particular about some of the health or immune outcomes? You had mentioned immunity that you saw in that study, and what also excited you about to look in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a 8-week trial. And basically what we did was we had a pen-based study. So delivering to pens, that's our what we call experimental unit for this. And this was a set of steers that came out of a ranch up in Wyoming, I think, for this. And basically what we did is we tracked weekly feed intakes throughout those 8 weeks of the trial. So, as expected, intakes are pretty low when cattle first arrive and they're newly weaned, they're bawling. So, they're just literally figuring out everything in life. And slowly intakes increase over, the 8 weeks. And one of the things, one of our treatments was a rumen protected B vitamin, a combination. And so not just one B vitamin, there's lots of them, right? And they all have slightly similar but also distinct functions. So some are more important in aspects of the immune system, some are more important in aspects of protein metabolism, for example. So it's nice to have the combination of things there because they're kind of doing different jobs. And basically, we see that those animals tended to kind of pick up on feed more quickly when they had the B vitamins in the diet. And really, when you dig down into it, I think what was partially driving that response is that those animals don't get as sick. So we had a tendency to have a lower number of what we would call the first medical treatment. So the first time an animal would be like, you're suspicious, I'm going to bring you to the chute, see if you have a temperature, see if you have lethargy, like all the symptoms that would say you qualify for an antibiotic treatment because you've got respiratory, let's get you better. We had less of those with that treatment. And I think and also of the 8-week trial, those animals who got that, they also get pulled a little bit later in the trial. So it suggests that the animals that did not get those rumen protected B vitamins, they actually get sick sooner. And then we're kind of delaying that a little bit and then having less of that overall when we give them the B vitamins. And I think that fits with our bias that we were just talking about, which is this is a period where they simply can't consume enough feed. They're voluntarily not consuming enough feed to have the microbes have enough to be able to make those B vitamins.
Yeah, you wish it would be more complicated, but perhaps it really is that simple. And so you talked about later and less pulls. Was there any direct impact on immunity that you were able to measure in the study?
So I think one of the things that's been really fun about some of the research that we've done at Iowa State in the last several years is some of the collaborations that we've formed. We're a group of mineral and vitamin nerds, but we've also found some really great immunology nerds to hang around with. And I say that because we all, we sit and have a beer and talk about our results. There's a lot of big grins where people are like, what if we did this? What if we did this? So it's cool to see the excitement. So Jody McGill is our collaborator at our vet school, and she's a bovine immunologist, and her expertise is really things that happen in the lung in particular. So she's really interested in bovine respiratory disease complex, very common in receiving cattle, right? And so with Jody, what we have done is kind of what I would call kind of a two-prong approach. One is we're actually able to take essentially a tube and put it in that calf's nose and flush his lungs with a little bit of saline and then draw that saline back up And the grad students are pros at this. They can do this in like 60 seconds now in an animal. It's amazing. And that fluid that we pull back up, they then isolate cells out of there. And some of these cells are going to be things like immune cells, and they're not in the lung tissue itself. They're kind of hanging out around it. And so this is kind of a snapshot of like who's on the way to the lung from an immune response kind of perspective. So we did that at day 28 and day 56. So 4 weeks and 8 weeks of this trial. We kind of pick those days. One, the first month is the most critical for disease, but also some people will kind of have 2 month receiving protocols. Some people will have 1 month. So we wanted to capture both of those windows. And we see a few changes in the lungs, but where we really see changes is in a blood sample that we took. And so in this blood sample, we're basically exposing it in the lab to pathogens to say, okay, if this animal were to see a disease challenge, can you mount an immune response? Can you mount an inflammatory response? And so we measure two cytokines. So cytokines are kind of the first early responders that are out to say, get ready, something bad has gotten here and you need to get ready for it. And so we measured IL-1 beta and IL-6. And what was really interesting is that when we gave these animals, they had been on the diets for either 28 days or 56 of the B vitamins, the rumen protected B vitamins, they have a cytokine response, which you want these cells to have, right? You want them to have an immune response, but it's kind of muted a little bit. I think that's the right way to think about it. So it's not this kind of overzealous immune response. And cytokines are tricky to interpret, right? So it's kind of like, do you want more or do you want less? But the way that I think of it is, if you have what we call a cytokine storm, so just a really overzealous immune response. Dairy cows are notorious for this. They're very pro-inflammatory. I'm sure it has nothing to do with single tray milk selection. But when an animal has a really overzealous immune response, they're redirecting nutrition to support that immune response. It takes amino acids to build those cytokines. And instead, we want them to be putting that into growth. So I think it's a positive sign that these guys have they have a response, but they tamp it down just a little bit. And I think that that's when you see some transient effects in growth and things like that. But I also think that fits with why we see these animals that just didn't seem to get as sick during the trial.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we've learned a lot about immunity besides let's make sure they have a really good response. And as you say, it can require a ton of nutrition to keep that going that's now not available for growth. Whereas they're just kind of ready to go and fire when they need to. Fascinating. Whether other interesting key findings from that study that you're able to share at this point?
I think the health stuff is really the most interesting. Maybe at the end of the day, like 28 days look like it might be kind of the peak, kind of beneficial window. And I think that makes sense because after 28 days, we're starting to pick up nicely on intakes. And so really the majority of our health benefits are seen there, especially I would say in like week 2 and 3, which, fits perfectly when we typically see like shipping fever break and things like that for newly arrived calves. But I think it's really interesting, I guess maybe mechanistically, just to add, there's nice evidence from especially the human literature that certain B vitamins are anti-inflammatory, where part of their job is literally to say, whoa, that's enough. We need to kind of slow that down a little bit. And so I think our results kind of make sense. It's always nice when results make sense and kind of fit in a kind of clean picture. But this was kind of nobody's really studied it super intensely. And so we weren't completely sure what we would see. And I think there's some really practical, implications for our findings here.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing it. Fascinating. And we got the start of something. So that's great. Thank you very much. And thanks for your insight today and how you explained to the audience the role of B vitamins and how they're produced and different things that might impact that. It's super clear. And as a guy that likes to build walls, I'll make sure that I throw some B vitamins into the mortar. I think that's what you said. But it's fascinating. So thank you very much. And with that in mind, I want to thank our audience for joining us. And if you get a chance to log in and look for other past episodes, please don't forget to subscribe to The Rumination on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and of course, other platforms. And you can find also those links through the Jeffo website at jeffo.ca. There you can get more information. This podcast was brought to you by Jeffo Nutrition, precision nutrition for a growing world. And Dr. Hansen, I want to thank you again for your time today.
Thanks, Chris. It was my pleasure.
And everybody out there, have a wonderful day.